Ladies and gentlemen, welcome wrestling fans worldwide to Knoxville and the Great Smoky Mountains for the Ron Fuller, Tennessee Studcast.
6 feet 9 inches tall, 265 pounds.
This historic podcast from one of the most respected and successful wrestlers and promoters will follow the footsteps of the largest and oldest wrestling family on the planet.
Listen to what I'm saying. That's right. Bring that camera in here a little bit closer.
Through 93 years and 4 generations.
The stud has arrived.
Old school or new fan, this unique broadcast will educate and captivate as Ron details decades of professional wrestling's growth with truly unforgettable stories.
I want those people out there at home to hear the stud.
Sit back and enjoy the ride with the Tennessee Stud.
The Tennessee Stud. You will learn that name. You will remember it.
And now,
the stud is here.
Hey everybody, welcome in. It's David Summers, and here comes another Studcast with the Tennessee Stud, Ron Fuller. This is the story of wrestling in America, as told by the Stud, whose family started the profession over 100 years ago. So now, let's step back into the ring, back into time. Let's get wall to wall, treetop tall, with the Tennessee Stud, Ron Fuller. Hey, Ron, I guess the words for the day would be Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving, and I know it's going to be an exciting Thanksgiving for a lot of folks, and you're going to be celebrating right there in Tennessee, right?
Oh, yeah, man. Certainly are, and looking forward to it, and yeah, I'd like to do the same thing. Thank everybody, and I really appreciate everybody listening that does. And, great. It's one of our great events in our country, thank goodness. And it's pretty crazy. We got it from Indians a long time ago. But it's a great thing that we do in our country, and a pretty great tradition.
And it truly is an American holiday. It's one that we came up with, and I think that for a lot of people, their favorite holiday, and I would be included in that. And deviled eggs are not a part of that, even though I can knock those babies out. All right, Ron, I tell you what, this Studcast, this is one I've been waiting for. There was so much work, money, and effort put into this Birmingham opening night event. I can't wait to hear the complete story behind it. Break it down for us.
Well, man, I'm just as excited as you are about this one, Dave. Although it's only been about 6 months, after we purchased Birmingham and all of the northern part of Alabama back in 1980, it seemed like a couple of years before the first event ever happened. So it wasn't just the 5 owners of the territory that was excited about all this, but all the wrestlers were on fire about it as well. They realized that this city, being more than twice as large as any other in the state, was by itself likely to produce hundreds of additional dollars on every one of those weekly payoff checks, man.
Wow. Okay. I can see where that alone would make anyone excited. Normally, I would be asking, where are we going to be riding today? But I already have an answer to that. All right. So I guess I should ask, did you have anything special or different for this particular opening night?
Well, this entire Studcast is going to be devoted basically to Birmingham's opening night. But I think a great place to start this would be with something special on the card taking place on that night. And I have intentionally not mentioned until now what this night was going to be all about. My partners and I had decided months earlier on the perfect and most meaningful card for this event. We were trying to figure out, what are we going to do that's special here? So this historic night began. And I got a little story here, Dave, to start this one off with. This historic night began 26 years earlier in 1954, before this Birmingham event in 1980, long before it, as a matter of fact. It began with my grandfather, Roy, purchasing a piece of a huge territory from his fellow promoter and friend, Leroy McGirt, out there in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And both men were members and founding fathers of the National Wrestling Alliance 6 years earlier, before this 1954 Gulf Coast sale. So my father, after his father, discouraged him from becoming a wrestler, which my dad and I talked about this a whole lot about why that was the case, but my grandfather didn't want my father to be a wrestler. And so my dad just went ahead and then he moved outside of Tennessee. He moved to Chicago and became a welder in the 1940s, in the late 1940s. And then when he returned to Tennessee, about 2 years after that, he began to train as a wrestler with Roy's younger brother, Lester. And Roy didn't want him to be a wrestler. Now Lester, who is Roy's brother, is going to train him. And then he was also trained by another one of Roy's wrestlers, the great Charlie Carr, man, who was still alive, who trained Rob and I years later, many, many years later. So my father was born, he was a born wrestler, man, and as were many of our family members, I think. And he became an instant success in the ring. But because of his problem with his father, he decided to change his last name. He wanted to make a name for himself, out on his own. So that's how he became Buddy Fuller. That's the name he picked. So, and he did so well in 1950. My grandfather put him in charge of his entire East Tennessee operation that was run out of Kingsport, Tennessee. And that's where my father had even more success than just being a wrestler. He was a pretty darn good booker and a heck of a promoter. Mm-hmm. So that kind of takes us back to Roy's buying that piece of Leroy McGurk's territory in 1954. So because of my dad's success, in 1954, Roy sent my father south to Mobile, Alabama, to build a much larger territory than in one in East Tennessee that he had been working in and doing so well with. So this territory was going to be called appropriately based upon where it was located, Gulf Coast Wrestling, right down there in Mobile on the Gulf Coast. So after setting up an operation, recruiting the wrestlers, getting the TV stations to carry a TV show, one of the first things my father did was create a belt for the first ever Alabama heavyweight champion. And it was a very nice looking, unique belt. And it was going to get a lot of use. From 1954, when my dad put it together, he used that thing, and a lot. Some of the original guys that held that belt were Mario Galento, my granddad's brother, Lester Welch, Sputnik Monroe, Herb Welch, Lee Fields, and my father held the belt at the time. There was even a great amateur wrestler in that part of the country who had turned pro. His name was Tom Drake. And Tom was an elected Alabama State Representative official at always in Montgomery at the Capitol there. So, that belt was held by some pretty different type of characters, to be honest with you.
Well, some legendary names, too. And a couple of those stand out even when I was a young man, first enjoying wrestling. All right, so we're getting a great history lesson today, Stud. It's exactly what your Studcasts do that others cannot even touch. I've never heard of any of this before, especially about one of the first ever Alabama champions. And did you say was a politician and one of the original holders of the 1954 official Alabama wrestling belt that you described?
Yes, he certainly was, Dave. And as a young fan myself, I was about 6 years old when we went there in 1964. I remember watching Tom Drake many times as a little boy. And my father, over a 5-year period of time, built one of the best territories in history down there on the Gulf Coast, with one crowd in particular in 1958, with him and Mario Galento that we've talked about many times, and we talked about quite a bit lately. That may be still the largest crowd in the history of Southern professional wrestling. So by 1950, my father had moved us, basically from the Gulf Coast. We moved up to Memphis, Tennessee. He had sold his part of that operation down there on the Gulf Coast to the three Fields brothers. They were also a part of the Welch family, members of the Welch family. And in 1962, the Fields brothers decided that for whatever reason, they no longer wanted to recognize an Alabama champion in their territory. And they were running Mississippi some at that point. They were running Louisiana some at that point. So, I can figure out some of it. So they decided to take this belt that my dad had made. It was really a beautiful belt. And they took it and put it on a shelf for 16 years. It's set on a shelf.
Wow.
In 1962, they said, we're not going to have an Alabama champion anymore. They didn't throw the belt away, thank God. And Lee kept it for all those years, for 16 years. 16 years later, 1978, I bought him out. I bought the Fields brothers out. Mm-hmm. And one of the last things we did when we closed the deal is Lee presented me with this Alabama championship belt that had been sitting in his cabinet for 16 years. So kind of a crazy little story there.
Wow. So you handle the belt after it's been shelved after that period of time. All right. So I'm beginning to maybe see what you and your partners had in mind for this Birmingham opening night in this particular Studcast.
Well, I remember when I said I was looking for something special for our Birmingham opening. What a history that belt had.
Yeah.
And when Lee gave it to me, I was like dumbfounded about, my God, man, why has this been sitting on your shelf all this length of time? And he kind of explained a little bit of it, but it still looked like a new belt in 1980. So in 1980, 18 years after it had last been used, we built our opening night in Birmingham, the largest city in the state, around a one-night tournament. That was going to have 15 matches. That was going to culminate with the crowning of a new Alabama champion on a spectacular card. We had seven present champions in this tournament, including the present world junior heavyweight champion, Les Thornton, and also, obviously, another NWA champion, a former one, who might just have been one of the best wrestlers in the sport's history. And I'm talking about Thesz.
Wow, talking about something special for your opening night. I think that definitely should do it for you, Ron. All right, it's a great idea, but I never knew that belt had such wonderful history behind it and was being brought back after all those years with at least 7 champions vying for it. So, that's a tremendous night of wrestling. So on the last Studcast, you revealed the building was half sold out in advance. So what about the status a week later when tickets went on sale at the box office on the night of the tournament?
Well, actually, they didn't go on sale at the box office as it was intended to, because all of the tickets had been sold out before anybody got down there to buy a ticket. So we had sold out that entire building in advance. We talked to the Boutwell manager. We talked him into selling an additional 500 standing room only tickets, so that those thousands of fans when it came time for fans to start arriving there, matches started at 8:30. About 6:30, fans started arriving. And the first 500 of them, basically got to buy those standing room only tickets. But after that, fans just started piling up out there on the street. Boutwell Auditorium was on one of the main streets in downtown Birmingham, and there was a park across the street. And they stopped traffic going on that street both directions, and the fans were just piled out into the street and over into the park, and they didn't want to go home. It was kind of a bad situation. You got probably 3,000, maybe 4,000 people outside the building that can't get in.
Wow. What a spectacle that had to be, and a great welcome for Southeastern to the big city of Montgomery. All right. So since we're going to be doing this entire Studcast on this one event, can you tell us who was in this huge tournament that Thursday night, November 13th, 1980.
Certainly can, man. But first, I'm glad you mentioned that date, for this event. We were going to run Birmingham every Monday night. And the reason was it had always been the traditional night for wrestling for Birmingham, all the way back to the 1930s when Roy first started running Birmingham. So our event was originally scheduled for Monday, November the 10th. But about a month in advance of that date, the building had a scheduling problem. Someone had forgot to put that date. It was picked by another customer before. We didn't even want it, but our Monday was gone. So they had to give it to that other customer, and we were asked to move our event 3 days later to Thursday. That was a kind of a strange beginning for us, too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, so really a very interesting fact that you just laid out. Obviously, it didn't hurt your attendance at all. So I think you already mentioned there were 16 wrestlers in this tournament. That meant there were going to be like 15 matches on this card. So tell us about this huge tournament and who was in it.
Like all tournaments, man, I usually can only give you basically the first round contestants because it's hard to keep up with the winners and the losers, especially in a tournament that's got 4 rounds in it and it's got 16 contestants in it. This is a major tournament. You hardly ever wrestled in a tournament that had that many people in it. And luckily, I was able to track down the winners and the losers for this entire tournament. I found the entire thing, so I can give you all this information. So we ran ads in the newspaper, Birmingham newspaper, for all our events, and the newspaper ad for this very first one was mostly correct. But we had to make 3 minor adjustments at the last minute to the first round contestants, and one of the first round matchups had a special stipulation that we were going to add to it that we had decided to do after we ran that Birmingham ad. So just a few other thoughts before we give everybody the participants in this tournament. We gave a tremendous amount of thought about how to take advantage of the fact that Birmingham was one of the first cities in America to get cable TV. And they got, obviously, Ted Turner's WTBS satellite TV station, which was well on its way to being seen around the world.
Yeah.
Going to be, a few years later, a worldwide television show. So Robert had become the booker for the Georgia territory. Everybody knows that at this point. He's working some in this territory, but he's already and doing some things in Georgia. So its TV show was on the Georgia television show was obviously on WTBS every Saturday from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock Eastern time. And for certain, being watched by wrestling fans from all around Birmingham. Birmingham wrestling fans are going to find wrestling. If you got a show there, they're going to watch it,
Yeah.
Fans were there. And that wasn't the only place that we had a little competition in that Birmingham market. But WOR out of New York City was on every Saturday from 11:15 to 12:15 in the afternoon. So we were taking advantage. We decided we can't avoid this. So let's take advantage of the fact that we got these 2 stations here from another part of the country, and let's get somebody in the tournament from this deal.
I mean, really, that doesn't surprise me that you guys were doing that. You guys didn't miss a thing. It certainly didn't hurt that your brother was now the booker in Georgia, and I'm sure you were going to get somebody special from that territory to come over for this tournament.
Oh, do you really think so, Dave? Actually, man, we got 2 wrestlers from that Georgia territory for the tournament. So before we get into who was in the tournament, I want to talk about the additional things that we did on our TV show in that Birmingham market. 2 Saturdays before Birmingham, the Alabama Championship Tournament, we did an entire 60-minute TV show for Birmingham's 2 stations alone, with nothing but plugs for the event. We had never done that before or after. I said earlier that the wrestling crew was extremely excited about the event. When we did this exclusively for Birmingham, the entire show, the wrestlers began to feed off of that enthusiasm, man. They could see our commitment to what we wanted to see happen in Birmingham and what we were going to make happen, as a matter of fact. So, and I made sure that none of the owners told any of these guys about the huge advance sale. I didn't want the wrestlers to know that, they were going into a sold out building. I wanted them to get that. I wanted them to get that extra bit of being fired up when they walked into the back of that building and they got out on that stage and pulled the curtain back to see what it looked like to see that crowd.
That had to be an adrenaline rush personally for each of those guys that peeked through the curtain. I mean, really, you guys were milking this one, weren't you? I mean, who all was in this once in a lifetime event?
So here's the first round brackets, man, for this Alabama heavyweight championship belt that had been retired 18 years earlier. And in the first round, there were 8 matches. I'll give everybody the first round contestants in the tournament, but not the last 3 rounds until we finish the TV show. Then I'll give the people the rest of the results. But I'll let everybody know at this point who was in this tournament. So the first match of the night in the first round of the tournament was going to be former Big C, Don Carson, who at this point had lost his mask, and he was wrestling as Carson again. He was going to be against the first of the 7 present champions that are in this tournament. And this one was straight off that Georgia TV station that I just mentioned. And we had the Georgia heavyweight champion, Mr. Wrestling number 2, Johnny Walker, wrestling against Don Carson in the very first match.
Wow.
Second match was originally scheduled as Bob Armstrong versus Ron Bass, but Bob was being replaced by Joe Leduc. Joe was going to be facing the second champion in the tournament. Ron Bass was at this point one half of the new Southeastern Tag Team champions. So here was your first 2 matches had champions in them. In the third match of the first round was a feud that was beginning kind of in the beginning stages. But it had the third champion in the tournament. The United States Junior Heavyweight Champion, Norvell Austin, was going to be wrestling against the former champion, Jerry Stubbs. Fourth match was, here's your boy from New York, man, your New York guy, was going to be Iron Mike Masters. And he'd been with us for a couple of months, right out of New York. He'd been seen on that television many, many times. And so he was already over. People really knew him when they came and got introduced.
Yeah.
And so, and he was going to be facing none other than Bob Armstrong. Fifth match featured a wrestler that, in my opinion, was maybe one of the best of all time, undoubtedly. Former NWA world champion Lou Thesz. He was taking on Big C number 2. Big C number 2 was actually a wrestler named Jerry Brown, tremendous wrestler. And but Jerry Brown was still wearing his Big C mask, and he didn't lose his mask, so he kept his identity hidden by still being the Big C too. Sixth match was Charlie Cook, who was the 4th champion in the tournament, against the 4th champion in the tournament, the other half of the Southeastern Tag Team champions, the Super Pro, managed by Don Carson. Seventh match was Birmingham fan favorite for many years before we were bought. They cooled us out, and we intentionally picked him out, and we had to track him down because we wanted to get the older fans there. We wanted to put a familiar face for these older fans that had not seen who this new company was, and we wanted them to see a familiar face. Yeah. And we brought in Bearcat Brown, who was wrestling the 6th champion on the card, the world junior champion, Les Thornton.
That was really smart, though. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the final match of the first round, my brother Rob, who had a history of wrestling in Birmingham, he wrestled there in the early 70s a whole lot when he lived in Nashville for many years. And he was going to be against the 7th champion in this tournament, the Southeastern heavyweight champion, Mongolian Stomper, managed by Don Carson. So when we get to the Southeastern TV show for this one, Birmingham fans only, we're going to find out about the special stipulation for this first round match. This first round match, I mean, obviously, a couple of weeks earlier, Stomper had beaten me in the loser leave. I was gone. Rob had wrestled him once, and now he had wrestled him a second time. This was going to be a third time with him in Birmingham, and this was going to be a loser leave town. So one of those two guys, either Rob or the Stomper, was going to, and once they lost in the first round, they not only lost in the tournament, they had to leave Southeastern.
Wow, I mean, really an absolutely amazing card, Stud. 7 present champions out of the 16 competing, and last match in the first round was a loser leave Southeastern match. So when you look at the wrestlers in this tournament, it was undoubtedly one of the best ever done and a terrific setup. So really a tremendous presentation so far. We're close to a break. Let's do that now. When we return, you told me earlier we're going to have on this Studcast some of the actual audio from interviews for the special Birmingham TV. I'm pretty stoked about hearing that. That's going to be coming up in the second half when this Studcast continues. Okay, Studcast fans, Ron is getting much closer every week to his Studcast, being able to present for the first time complete matches and interviews from every available Southeastern TV show from 1980 all the way through 1985. Then Continental TV shows when the name changed until he sold it, and finishing in 1988 with his USA TV shows. His new streaming channel, TennesseeStudStreaming.com, has basically everything he has ever done in wrestling on it and should be ready in a few weeks, by late December 2024, hopefully. Happy Thanksgiving to all of our Studcast listeners, and thank you for your support. All right, welcome back once again, Studcast fans. This is Studcast number 376. It's titled Bob Wins Birmingham's Big Night, and it's already been a most unusual ride, and at this point, if I'm correct, we're not going to be talking about the ordinary Southeastern TV show that fans were accustomed to seeing every Saturday night. Is that the case, Stud?
Yes, that is, my man. We're going to be focusing on what was going to be a special TV show. It was made basically for the 2 Birmingham TV stations, and it was going to obviously promote the one-night tournament to the fans in that Birmingham market. And then it was also, we were going to obviously crown an Alabama heavyweight champion as part of that particular match. And it was also going to be a special one in other ways for the rest of the territory. So this was a special show in more ways than one. First was the fact it was recorded in a rating period month. And second, it had a former NWA world champion, Thesz, and a present world junior heavyweight champion, Les Thornton, wrestling on it. Not just on the show, but actually wrestling on this show. And they were both obviously in the tournament, and as well as the rest of the territory. So we had to do some pre-cut interviews and a personality profile for the 2 Birmingham stations before the studio crowd was allowed into the studio. We didn't want them knowing about the Birmingham stuff. And so we had to do some things before we let our crowd in. And, and then that was and we wanted to take advantage of that studio audience. So once we let them in, that's when we were going to have our live television matches. So it was pretty difficult to try to build a show like this for 2 completely different scenarios and 2 completely different cards. But I think we ended up doing a pretty good job of it.
All right, that's crazy. All right, but how did the TV show open? How'd you get started?
Well, this one we began with Thesz and Les Thornton at the set with Charlie and Les. And wow, what an ovation they got, man, once they were introduced. I mean, fans knew Thornton pretty well. He had been in these World Junior title matches and these triple World Championship events. And obviously, Thesz everybody knew Lou. He had been through that territory, no telling how many times before. So they got a big ovation, and then they both put the Southeastern company over really strong, man. Lou said there's something about it becoming one of the hottest places in wrestling to be right now. And he also said that he had heard about the recent triple world title cards that we had just had about 2 weeks earlier, and he congratulated Les Thornton for being on those cards. And I think he said something, if I'd have been champion again, maybe I could have got on it. So then they said they were both happy to be there, and they were both going to be wrestling on this TV show. And then they left the set after another big hand from the big studio crowd. Then Charlie and Les reminded fans that today was going to be the second championship match on TV. They had announced it TV before. Second TV match in the month of November. This one was going to be the Mongolian Stomper defending his that big old TV trophy against Bob Armstrong. And that match alone could have been a main event, man, on any TV anywhere in the world.
Yeah, well, obviously, this was going to be a really special TV show. Both Lou Thesz and Les Thornton wrestling on TV, and the TV trophy match. Stomper defending against Bob Armstrong. All right, so who was in the first TV match?
Well, Lou Thesz, man, and he had a pretty darn good opponent for this one. It's the New Yorker, man, Iron Mike Masters. And he was obviously, both these guys are in the tournament. For the Alabama championship, but I got to say, man, Iron Mike Masters was a good little worker for a young guy, but he was no competition for the great Lou Thesz, and there wasn't a lot of people that was a competition for Lou. After that match, for the fans in the territory everywhere but Birmingham, Bob Armstrong did a live interview in front of the studio audience for the other upcoming matches in the other cities in the territory. Didn't mention anything about this Birmingham tournament, so this was not going to be used on that Birmingham show, but it was used where we normally would, in the Dothan market, and seen in Birmingham and the Montgomery market. And in the TV show, it got the one that got sent to Birmingham. Bob pre-cut an interview earlier in the day. It was going to go to that Birmingham market.
All right, so we're going to, for the first time ever, I think, on a Studcast, we're going to play the audio of an actual interview that was played in the first interview slot of the Birmingham TV show, recorded on October 25th, 1980. So who was on this interview, Stud? Take us back in time.
Well, Les Thatcher interviewed in this one Jerry Stubbs, who was going to be facing basically at this point, his new arch enemy, man, the guy that was now wearing what Stubbs considered his belt, the United States Junior Heavyweight Champion, Norvell Austin, in the first round of the championship match 5 days later. This is going to be real history, Dave, on this Studcast. It's going to be the first interview ever done on a Studcast from a Southeastern show recorded back in the 1980s. And it will also be audio only, but that's just the next step toward us being able to show anything we want to in video. That's going to happen soon here for us. So, Dave, let's play that first interview.
All right, here it comes.
Wrestling will be coming your way in the month of November. And on Thursday, November the 13th, at the Boutwell Auditorium in Birmingham, a big one-night tournament to crown the Alabama State Heavyweight Wrestling Champion. With me right now, a gentleman who's United States Junior Heavyweight Champion, Jerry Stubbs. Jerry, we were discussing before we started this interview that years ago, Archie Moore tried to win the World Heavyweight title in 2 divisions, and you're setting out to do basically the same thing since you've entered this tournament on November the 13th. Moore was unsuccessful, but I know you're planning on being a success at it.
Well, Les, I do a lot of training. You can look at my body and tell that. But nevertheless, if I go to Montgomery, this United States junior belt right here, I'm at a borderline case. I'm at 220, 225. I can go either way. You know, I've wrestled people 300 pounds, and I've been victorious. So if I go to Birmingham, no matter who I wrestle, whether they got me outweighed, I know they're not going to look better than me, but if they got me outweighed, you can bet that I'm going to come out on top. And just like you said, I'm going to get both belts. I'm going to be the world champion all the way around. There's no, nobody can dispute my word because I'm going to be there in Birmingham.
Jerry, a lot of tough competition. Robert Fuller, Joe Leduc, Bob Armstrong is signed for this tournament, Ron Fuller. Every name that we mentioned has held a regional or area title someplace in their career. And, of course, stamina and endurance is going to be a big part of this tournament on the 13th.
Well, that's true, Les. You know, if you hadn't been a champion or if you're not championship material, you wouldn't be entering the contest. Because, look, I'm championship material. Robert Fuller, Ron Fuller, it don't matter who it is. Bob Armstrong, if you wasn't a champion, you wouldn't be there trying to get a championship belt. And I'm going to be there, and I'm going to take the championship belt.
Some of the top flight wrestlers from around the world will be vying in a one-night tournament on November the 13th, Thursday night, at the Boutwell Auditorium in Birmingham to crown the new Alabama State Heavyweight Champion.
All right, Stud, that was really cool. All right, so when are we going to be able to do video for these classic TV shows from 44 years ago?
Well, Dave, I think we're going to be able to pull this off hopefully within the next month. And the new streaming channel, going to be named TennesseeStudStreaming.com, is going to open for subscribers hopefully by maybe the last week in December of this year, 2024.
That's cool. All right, so it's TennesseeStudStreaming.com. And so hopefully by the end of the year, I know a tremendous amount of work is going into this. So we're going to ask everybody to be patient because when it comes, it's going to be really cool. And that is great news for everybody, Ron. The new Studcast, you'll be able to show anything you want to stick into future Studcast. And it's getting closer every week. All right, so let's go back to the show. And who is in the next TV match?
Well, the next match was the World Junior Heavyweight Champion, Les Thornton, and he had a very competitive opponent as well. And actually, it was the Super Pro, managed by Don Carson, one half of the tag champions at this point. And this match ended in a very rare TV 15-minute time limit draw. And wow, what a fantastic match this was, man! I'm telling you, Les Thornton was really on the top of his game. And so was Super Pro at this point.
Wow. All right. So since this TV was being done for distinctly different markets with two totally different cards, I guess there were probably, I'm guessing, two personality profiles.
Yes, there actually was, man, two of them. One was pre-recorded with Bob Armstrong, recorded before the fans were allowed in the studio. That was the one going to Birmingham to be used on the two Birmingham TV stations, and the other was going to be live with Thesz and Les Thornton. It was going to be done during the usual TV show. It was going to be shown in all of the normal television stations in the territory.
All right, Stud, so I'm happy to announce we're going to be able to hear the personality profile done for the Birmingham market?
That's correct, man. We certainly are. And this profile was pre-cut before the studio audience was loud in the studio. Charlie Platt and Bob Armstrong were on this. They discussed the huge tournament coming up in Birmingham. So let's go ahead, and if we don't mind, play that one for us, Dave.
And it's promotion rights for pro wrestling. This can mean only one thing: top competitors in this area, a lot of money and prize money and tournaments that, as in the past, and I've been affiliated with Don Curtis for some 4 years now, and I've seen Cadillac tournaments, I've seen Continental tournaments, but the name of the game is competition, and the man seated to my left, Bob Armstrong, is very much a contender in this area now in the state of Alabama. Bob?
Well, I was real pleased that Don Curtis saw fit to purchase this area, and I think it'll do a lot for wrestling all over Alabama. I know you and I have talked several times about his proposed prizes that he'll be giving away. He believes in giving away a lot of money. He believes in putting a lot of money back into wrestling. Now, as you saw, that first match was a pretty tough match. The guy was pretty tough, but I got an old saying: when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And I reside by that. I train hard. I try to be a top competitor, like you said, and it's going to be a pleasure wrestling this area because I'm no stranger I know a lot of people around the Birmingham area and all the surrounding area. I've been there and had some of my toughest matches there, and now it looks like I'm going to be coming back. We've talked several times about the tournament to be held for the Alabama State Championship.
That is going to be some kind of
Exactly
tournament,
right. There'll be many, many matches, and many, many stars from all over the country have already signed, and Don Curtis is right now looking for more people. It'll probably be the biggest tournament ever held in this area, and it will crown an Alabama State champion. Everybody needs a champion. So I think these people with the stars that have already entered will get one heck of a champion. It'll be a long, hard night, and of course you and I can talk about that more as the weeks come, but I just want to express my pleasure of being back here. I hope to stay in shape, train hard, and when that tournament comes along, I hope I'm the man to wear the new Alabama belt. It has been sanctioned by the NWA, and it's really going to be something to see, Charlie.
Well, your previous records in pro wrestling, Bob Armstrong, only thing I can say, and showing no favoritism, you will be a top contender for that title, I'm sure, because I've seen you in matches all over the country and in Japan, and you are an outstanding competitor anywhere you go, and a hard-fought competitor.
Well, thank you very much. I hope I can live up to that.
All right, Stud, I tell you what, I could get used to this. Hearing this for the first time, I can only imagine what it's going to be like to see it as well. So who is wrestling on the third match of the show?
Well, this was another surprise, man, for all the Southeastern fans. Because Robert, is taking over the book in Georgia, and Jim Barnett was trying to maintain a good relationship with me and our territory after the way he had basically stolen my brother, right, to make a booker out of him. He was being extremely thoughtful, and he was allowing us to use Mr. Wrestling #2, who was his star and his champion, not only in the Birmingham tournament for the Alabama championship, but the entire following week, and that week in Montgomery and Mobile and Dothan, and also obviously on this spectacular TV show.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Mr. Wrestling 2 was on the TV show and also in the Alabama Championship Tournament in Birmingham, plus coming back the week after in 3 more Southeastern markets. So it really does sound like Jim Barnett was really trying to make things right with you.
He certainly was, man. And we were calling basically in all of the favors because we had this big Birmingham opening, and we were going to try to utilize this connection between Rob and us and the Georgia territory beyond that. So the studio crowd, basically, they had no idea who was going to be next on the TV show. And when Mr. Wrestling #2 came out of the dressing room, ready to wrestle and headed for the ring, that TV crowd exploded. They all knew him because of the TBS satellite station. So it was, it said a whole lot about the power of Ted Turner's WTBS satellite TV station and how many fans had already found it. Wrestling 2 didn't take long either, man, to finish his opponent, and he finished him with that bionic knee lift finish. I call it the patented knee lift. I don't ever remember anybody else ever doing that.
Wow, it looks like you had more pre-cut interviews for the Birmingham market and the Alabama Championship Tournament?
Yep, we certainly did. So after the Mr. Wrestling #2 TV segment, we slid the pre-cut Charlie Platt interview with Charlie Cook into that third interview slot of the Birmingham station shows only. And let's play that one if we can, Dave.
All right, let's do it.
Former Pittsburgh Steeler Charlie Cook, welcome.
Thank you, Charlie.
And you are no stranger to the state of Alabama, by any means.
No, I'm not, Charlie. All my people, my mother, father, and my grandparents, and I have so many cousins right around Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, and Utah, and I'm glad to be in this area. I've been thinking about moving back to Tuscaloosa, and this could be just as good a time as any.
Charlie, you're an outstanding competitor. You played pro football for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Tell us a little about that.
I played 9 years of professional football, Charlie, and during the off season, I used to lay around and doing nothing, so I wanted to do something to stay in shape and make money also. And wrestling was one of my first loves, and so I approached wrestling with a negative attitude, but once I got into it, I liked it. And here I am, Charlie, right here in the Alabama area, and I hope to stay here for a long time.
You were one of the first to sign with Don Curtis on the big purchase of Southeastern Wrestling for the entire state of Alabama, and I'm sure, Charlie, you're interested in that upcoming tournament that will be taking place in the city of Birmingham for the Alabama state champion.
That's right, Charlie. You know, you got some good wrestlers coming in this area. Bob Armstrong, Ron Fuller, myself. You got Eddie Mansfield, Bob's son coming in, and I want to say something about Brad. I'm talking about Brad Armstrong. He hasn't been wrestling that long. He's had good training from Bob, which has been wrestling for a long time, and the boy's going to be good. And this tournament you're talking about is going to be great.
Thank you very much. Charlie Cook, one of the outstanding competitors you'll be seeing in action in the arenas here in the state of Alabama with Southeastern Wrestling.
All right, Stud, I tell you what, this was fast becoming one of the best TV shows in Southeastern history. And to make it even better, it was during the rating period. That had to be huge for you. So it was going to close out with a TV trophy championship match with the champion Mongolian Stomper, managed by Don Carson, versus Bob Armstrong. So how did that work out?
Well, man, with a studio crowd on their feet, man, for the last 5 minutes of the match, and an explosion, man, when Bob Armstrong pinned the Stomper right in the middle of the ring to become the new Southeastern TV champion.
Wow. So it looks like you had one more pre-cut interview scheduled for the end of the Birmingham show. So who was gonna close out that show?
This one was going to be with Les Thatcher. He's going to be talking to Joe Leduc and my brother Robert, and about the upcoming tournament there on that same week. So let's play that last interview, man.
And now a special announcement for you Birmingham fans. The one-night tournament for the Alabama State Championship, as sponsored and sanctioned by the National Wrestling Alliance, has been moved to Thursday, November the 13th. That's in Birmingham's Boutwell Auditorium. The date has been set back because of the overwhelming amount of entries from around the country for this first time ever Alabama State Championship. Two of those entries are with me right now. These gentlemen are currently the Southeastern Tag Team Champions, but Joe Leduc here on my right and his partner and co-champion on my left, Robert Fuller, will be in that one-night tournament on November the 13th. And Robert, it's going to be singles action right down the line on the 13th.
That's right, singles action. Although we do hold the titles as a partnership, we're going to have to go into this thing one man for all, and that's the way it's going to wind up. I'd like to say that it's going to be a big night for me to return to Birmingham. I haven't been there for some time, and I say sometime it makes me seem like an older fella because I think it was about 1974 since I've wrestled down there. But I'm looking forward to going back. I got a lot of friends there, and I'm certainly looking forward to having a chance to become the Alabama heavyweight champion. There's so many people right now that want that title and want to get it mixed up in this Alabama heavyweight situation that it's going to be a real honor to not only wrestle against all of those people in the tournament, but to have an opportunity to win it.
Robert, I know you'll be geared for go on that night. And Joe, of course, there is a chance that you may be facing your partner before the evening is over on the 13th because, as we said, it's singles action, and both of you are geared to go after that big belt that's going to be for the Alabama state champion.
That's right, Les. You know me for about 5 years, and every time you had the chance or the unluck to watch me wrestle everywhere in the country, you know I don't give any points and I don't give any chance to my opponent. I go in the ring and I go there to win. That's what I'm paid for, and that's why I'm a winner. And I come from Canada, and I never been in Birmingham, Alabama. I never been in Huntsville, Alabama. And it's a real honor to me to be able to go in Birmingham and visit the beautiful state of Alabama. But in the tournament, I understand that Robert and I are the champion of the Southeastern area. And if by I couldn't say chance, if we have to wrestle one another, we're the champion in the Southeastern area, but if we have to wrestle one another, Robert, I'm sorry, we're going to have to fight it off.
Well, that's understood. That's an understood point. Right now, we're the champions, like you said. We're coming to Birmingham, not as the tag champions, but as singles to go in this tournament, and it's going to be an exciting night of wrestling, Les.
November the 13th, Thursday night in Birmingham.
All right, Stud, I tell you what, I'm really enjoying these interviews from the TV shows 44 years ago, no less, and I can't wait to be able to see the wrestlers. So not just see them in interviews, by the way, but watch them in action from TV matches to matches recorded in arenas across the Southeastern area. That is going to be so cool. All right, this has been undoubtedly one of the best Southeastern TV shows in history. So it's time for you, Stud, to give us the results of the Alabama Championship Tournament on Southeastern's first ever Birmingham event, Thursday night, November 13th, 1980. Let's go.
All right. Well, in the first round of the tournament, in the first match, and I already talked about who was in these matches, but we'll cover it again. Mr. Wrestling 2 beat Don Carson. We get to keep it kind of short here because we got so much happening in that night in Birmingham. And in the second match in that first round, Ron Bass, who was managed by Don Carson, got a win over Joe Leduc. In the third match, first round, Jerry Stubbs got the best of Norvell Austin. In the fourth match in the first round, Bob Armstrong won the match over Iron Mike Masters. In the fifth match in the first round, Lou Thesz beat Big C number 2, Jerry Brown, managed by Carson. In the sixth match in the first round, Super Pro, managed by Don Carson, won over Charlie Cook. The seventh match in the first round, Les Thornton beat Bearcat Brown. And then in the last match of the first round, which was a loser leave match, loser having to leave Southeastern, the Mongolian Stomper, managed by Don Carson, was able to win the match over my brother Robert, but it was an extremely controversial finish. Besides his Stomper, Carson brought with him down to the ring when this match started both his tag team champions, Ron Bass and Super Pro. So there's Rob, and there's Carson, there's Stomper, there's a Ron Bass and the Super Pro. I mean, so the referee got involved. He told the Bass and Super Pro, you got to go back to the dressing room. What are you even down here for, right? And so they did until the referee, while trying to get Carson off the apron of the ring, got slammed, man, face first into Carson.
Wow.
On a violent collision, man. Stomper was accidentally thrown by Rob into the referee's back. And so Rob then, Stomper, once he crashed into the referee crashed face first into Carson, knocked Carson off on the floor. Referee went down in the ring. And Stomper took a bump. When he got up, Rob put the full leg lock on him right in the middle of the ring. But there's no referee at that point. Referee's down, and he's going to be there for a little bit. And when that happened, guess who comes back to the ring? Ron Bass and the Super Pro. They returned to the ring. They stomped Rob off of the Mongol. They both pile drived him. Then they put the Mongol on top of him. And then they got out of the ring. Now, this building is so crammed at this point. I mean, they had to fight their way back to get to the stage to where they were some kind of safety there. The police were pretty good, but, they weren't accustomed to seeing this type of heat before, so they weren't Johnny on the spot. But anyway, they managed to get back to the huge stage. Referee crawled over there, shortly afterward, and he counted my brother out, and my brother ended up leaving Southeastern for Georgia.
Wow, so talk about a dirty way to lose a match. I would definitely call that a controversial finish to a match also. All right, so what happened in the next round of the tournament?
Well, the first match in the second round of the tournament was Mr. Wrestling number 2. He was going to be against Ron Bass. Ron Bass got the best of Wrestling 2. Second match in the second round was Jerry Stubbs against Bob Armstrong. Bob Armstrong won that one. Third match of round 2 was Lou Thesz against the Super Pro, and Lou won that one. And in the last match of round 2, which was Les Thornton against the Mongolian Stomper, the Mongolian Stomper won that match.
All right, so this tournament was headed into the semifinals. How about the 2 semifinal matches? How about those?
That ended up being Bob Armstrong against Ron Bass. And Bob beat Bass to get into the finals. Mongolian Stomper got the best of Lou Thesz, man, and he had advanced with a little bit of help from Carson, and he advanced to the finals.
All right. So, I mean, to me, that's crazy. It was the second championship these two were facing each other for only 5 days after Bob won the TV championship trophy from the Stomper. All right. So, who won the first Alabama championship belt match in 18 years?
Well, man, Bob Armstrong, and that packed building exploded. When Don Curtis was there, he had not been introduced at all. He hadn't been seen during the course of the whole night, but fans had been seeing our TV for 6 months, so they knew who Don Curtis was. And Don Curtis brought that belt down to the ring, got in, and he presented it to the new Alabama heavyweight champion. And Bob Armstrong put it on, and gosh almighty, it was one of those chill bump moments, man. I mean, that building was just lit up. And he left that ring with a belt that hadn't been worn in 18 years.
Wow, that had to be a special moment. I mean, I don't even know how old Bob was at the time, but he had the perfect physique for a wrestler. He was a good-looking, I am secure with my masculinity, enough to say he was a good-looking man. He was a great baby face. Everybody loved Bob. So that's a great night of wrestling for a city that had been waiting almost a year for wrestling to return. So how about the attendance for this first Southeastern event, the first Southeastern event in Birmingham history?
Well, the wrestlers, man, they had been going crazy all night, man, after looking out that curtain and seeing what was out there, So on the other side of the curtain, man, was a sea of humanity. I mean, that building, every seat was filled and there was almost 1,000 more people standing in the standing room only area of the floor in the big old Boutwell Auditorium. It was a 7,000. The Boutwell Auditorium manager came back and talked to me before we left. And he said, I asked him, I said, how many is in here? And he said, 7,000 people, Ron.
Wow.
He said, it's the biggest crowd I have ever seen in this building.
Wow, that's right. And the Boutwell Auditorium is right downtown, right?
Right downtown.
Right in the center of the city. What a studcast this has been. Truly amazing what went into the TV and the matches in that Alabama championship tournament. So much fun. After our being able to include those 4 clips from the 1980 Southeastern TV shows, I'm really happy to hear that we are getting very close to a totally new studcast with total audio and video capabilities. Plus, the news about the streaming channel may be being ready for subscribers to get on board sometime next month. That's good information too, and good news. All right, I'm sorry, we're not going to have enough time for a learning tree question on this show today. We've had it jam-packed. So where are we going to be riding next week, Ron?
My brother and I had been knocked out of Southeastern at this point. Both of us were gone from Southeastern, and both of us had lost to the Mongolian Stomper, and Don Carson had most of the credit, I guess, for those 2 wins. And we had a very unusual card that were going to be presented in the entire territory except for Birmingham, which are not going to have their next event. Birmingham's not going to come back on the very next week. It's going to come back on the following Monday after the next Monday, not until November the 24th, 1980. So it was very rare. We didn't come right back, but I think it was good for us. We kept back to our normal night. The first time we're going to be there on a regular Monday night, which was always a Birmingham wrestling night, was going to be this next card, November 24th, 1980. We're going to review that Tuesday, November the 18th, 1980 Mobile card next time. We'll cover the TV show, the results of the matches and the attendances for the last 2 weeks, going back to that first Birmingham week, which I don't think we covered all the attendances for in this past episode. So we'll get that next week. We'll not only cover 1 week's worth of attendances, but next week we'll cover 2 of them.
All right, good deal. All right, folks, it's easy to get up with Ron, and he loves when you make contact with him. Find Ron at Ron Fuller, the Tennessee Stud. Ron Fuller, the Tennessee Stud on Facebook. Like and follow him there. Automatically become friends with a living legend. On Twitter, now known as X, he's at Ron Fuller Welch. You can follow him there, too. Check out the fantastic website, tnstud.com, tnstud.com. This Studcast is going to be there. Every Studcast ever done is going to be there. The Stud Store is where you can get 43 Super Studcast, 4 different 8x10 photos, and the best-selling novel, the Lion novel, Brutus, personally autographed to you. And subscribe to Ron's YouTube channel, Southeastern Rewind, on YouTube. Southeastern Rewind. Find hundreds of hours of classic old-school wrestling entertainment, 451 total videos, the last 154 Studcast, Ask the Stud shows, and short rides with the Stud. Go back 1 year or more and discover fantastic Stud stories with worldwide stars, Studcast archive stories, Tell Me More fan question shows, superstars of the past shows, and much more. That thing is loaded down, y'all. That's YouTube, Southeastern Rewind. It's the best deal in wrestling. All right, any final comments today, Stud?
Well, I've been able to recover all 3 of my Facebook sites. Thank goodness, Dave.
Yes.
After it appeared they were gone for good, maybe. And I got to thank my good friend, a guy named Ralph in the Smoky Mountains, who was a genius, man. I never saw anything like it, what it took to recover these, man. Crazy. It was done. I was hacked from somebody outside the country, and wow, this guy ended up having to go through Spanish and French countries to find my stuff. So I hope fans have enjoyed this one, and I hope we all have a great Thanksgiving coming up, and really appreciate everybody listening. And big things I got to say are on the horizon for us, man. And we hope fans are going to come along with us on this journey that we're about to get into. And please take care of yourselves and others, and may God bless us all.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving to you, Stud, for Ron Fuller in the Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. I'm David Summers saying thank you for listening. Find me on Facebook at facebook.com/DSummers955, on Twitter or X, Dave_Doin, on Instagram. It's Instagram.com/David Summers Productions, and hit me up anytime at DavidSummersProductions@gmail.com. This Studcast is a David Summers production for Tennessee Stud, LLC.
Thanks for joining us today for this historic Studcast. The true story continues next week. So full Nelson your friends and point them in our direction for another ride with the Tennessee Stud.
1, 2, 3.
This is David Summers saying so long from the Great Smoky Mountains.